Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba of LumumbaSpeaks.com. Once again, back with a great show. We're, of course, live now in conjunction with Bequalon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire and the home of African-centered news and information. And we're going to have a hell of a conversation that we're going to have. If you're watching, make sure you like, subscribe, share, hit the thumbs up button, and make sure that you are a blessing to the show, of course, via Cash App, Venmo, and of course the Super Chat. So we got some brothers and sisters that's going to be tapping. I see Freetown states. Oshay, like so many others, has flipped from red pill to black pill. Hope that you could tap in and let us know, what do you mean by that, right? What do you mean by him flipping from red pill to black pill? By red pill, of course, I would presume you're referring to the manosphere. But of course, we definitely want to hear what you have to say regarding black pill. And of course, Kevin, aka Mr. K. Good evening, Lumumba. Mr. K is in the house. I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate the email that you sent me this morning. Very busy today, so I was not able to, of course, review that information. But as once again, you are a wealth of knowledge. I would argue that you are, once again, one of the resident historians here at Lumumba Speaks and Bequalon Network, along with Brother Dwayne Omawale, who, of course, I always say is your favorite historian, and your favorite Pan-Africanist, favorite Pan-African. So I would argue that you, of course, are in that line of divine as well. So definitely give thanks for you, brother. You've given me a lot of reading material to do, and I give thanks for that. Very detailed email, by the way, with, of course, receipts, as we like to say. You know, of course, in the industry and the academia, we call them citations, but of course, in the YouTube streets and the pop culture, we call them receipts. So definitely give thanks for that. And so we're going to have a great show, family. Once again, we're going to be discussing what Oshay Duke Jackson, of course, the YouTube extraordinaire, gets wrong about Pan-Africanism, right? And as many of you may be aware, Oshay Duke Jackson is an African-American who lives present day in Uganda, Kampala, Uganda, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think that is, of course, the home of Idi Amin, right? Another issue is we tend to find, and this is my opinion, if anyone disagrees, you can push back, but a number of individuals on YouTube, they tend to at one point support Pan-Africanism, one point they don't. They kind of go back and forth. I would argue that ideologically, these are individuals who are in an extremely liminal space. And so we're going to unpack and address all of that. So, but once again, family, if you're watching, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit the notification bell. And of course, you can always be a blessing via the super chat. So we definitely want to have a great conversation. But one of the things I'm going to do, I know Brother Dwayne Omawale, he has stated that he's going to look to be part of the live as well. But as you all know, of course, here at Lumumba Speaks, we're intellectually provocative, intellectually bold, and historically insightful. And we believe that we could gain a competitive advantage by always, keyword always, betting on black. We're back once again in conjunction with Bequalon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire. We're going to be discussing what Oshay Duke Jackson gets wrong about Pan-Africanism. So we have a comment from Mr. Kevin, aka Mr. K. Oshay video uploads were just one-sided, skewed, anecdotal, conjectural, gossip information about the state of affairs in Africa as well as Pan-Africanism. I would agree. I would argue that he really was dealing with what many would call the boogeyman concept, where he was actually making some claims about Pan-Africanism that not only were averse to facts, but he really, and I'm finally looking for a text that Brother Dwayne sent me last night, where he says he's really arguing about an imaginary Pan-Africanism rather than Pan-Africanism that is actually in practice. So what we're going to do, family, I'm going to play the video, right? Fair use, fair use, fair use. If you're having any issues in terms of viewing after I start the video, please let me know, and I will pause the video. But we're going to go fair use, and we're going to review the video. There may be times where I'll pause, where we can respond. I did the same thing, of course, when we did a reaction to 19 Keys video, where he was making a number of claims that were not only ahistorical, but facts, and even in many instances contradictory to his statements earlier when he was on the Breakfast Club. So here we go, family.
Black world, and that is Pan-Africanism a scam? In its ideology, Pan-Africanism is not a scam. It's actually one of the greatest things that can benefit the black world. But on the other hand, its functionality is trash, which is why I referred to it as not just Pan-Africanism, but Pan-Scamanism. And a colleague of mine in the Pan-African YouTube community has come out to rebut some of my ideas, and Tariq Nasheed as well.
And all that tribalism that people like FBA talk about and ADOS, that's ethno-nationalism. FBA is a ethno-nationalistic movement, just like those East Africans who are ethno-nationalist, meaning they're nationalists to their ethnicity, meaning they only care about their ethnicity. They don't care about their race. They care about their ethnicity. They're tribalist.
Now, in this particular case, he's not.
So, one, let's unpack, right? He talks about Pan-Africanism being a scam. He talks about Pan-Scamanism. Many people attribute that to, of course, Dr. Umar Johnson. We do know that it's been over 15 years, at least 15 years, that we could document Dr. Umar Johnson has been seeking to raise funds to, of course, create the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, right, for boys, International Leadership Academy for Black boys, is yet to come to fruition. And there's been a number of issues regarding his raising funds, what he's done with the funds, etc. And so as a result, many people have attributed Pan-Africanism to be a scam. So I think that's one thing that we need to set clear here is in the Black community, we have a number of individuals who use a number of ideologies, theological frames of reference to scam, right? The most prominent that we know of course, is the church, right? I would make the argument, even though, of course, I'm not Christian in any way, shape, or form, that Christianity on its face is not a scam, right? But there are individuals, there are scammers who use Christianity to what? Scam people, right? To run a game on people, to engage in subterfuge and manipulate people for their financial benefit. This is a reality. We find the same with people who are seemingly Black-minded, individuals who are supposed to be Pan-Africanists in their orientation and leaning. If you've lived long enough, you're going to come across people who are promoting a concept or an idea for their own personal financial benefit. This is a reality. Does that mean that the ideology is rooted in scamming? No, but something to consider. So, got a comment from Big Ross. Did you ever do an interview with a representative of ADOS Advocacy Foundation? I'm so glad that you asked that question, Big Ross. I have not. However, I did reach out to those individuals via Twitter. I DM'd them on Twitter, made them aware of who I was, and asked, could we do an interview on my platform? And they did not respond. But I can pull that up. I can show that to you if need be, because sometimes people be capping here in these YouTube streets, right? But I did reach out, and unfortunately, the individuals did not. Keyword, they did not respond back. I was looking forward to doing an interview. Of course, as you know, I've done an interview with Afro Elite, who of course is of the FBA frame of reference, right? But I reached out to Claude on August 16th. I reached out to Simon on August 16th as well. And they never responded back. So unfortunate, but that's where we are with that situation. So, but I appreciate you reaching out and asking that question. The other issue, family, I don't have a problem interviewing individuals who have divergent ideologies or frames of reference viewpoints. This is not an echo chamber of thought, right? We believe that one of the ways you grow intellectually is by being challenged intellectually and be presented with information or ideas that are contrary to your own frame of reference. So don't have a problem with that. And hopefully they will respond at some point, and maybe you could put a bug in their ear and make them aware of this, that I'm still willing to, of course, do a sit down with them.
Calling out Tariq Nasheed by name, but he is calling out hashtag FBAs. He argues that Black Americans are those who consider themselves hashtag FBAs, do not care about the race of people, but instead we care about our own ethnicity. In other words, we are not concerned about what happens worldwide with Blacks, but now we're only concerned with ourselves. Now, here's an issue that I have with Afro Think Tank here. There has been times where Black Americans, or at least people in America, cared a lot about the issues of Africa.
You go to Nigeria, which is, if not the most corrupt nation in Africa, and it could be the most corrupt nation in the world, Minister Farrakhan.
Oh, now, Mr. Wallace.
It is the most corrupt nation that I have ever covered. I've been there 25 years ago, and I've been there as recently as last year.
Fine.
Now, in this case, the legendary Mike Wallace is saying that Nigeria is the most corrupt nation on planet Earth. But Louis Farrakhan, who had just did the Million Man March prior to that, responds to his claims.
So what? 35 years old. That's what that nation is. Now here's America, 226 years old. You love democracy? But there in Africa, you're trying to force these people into a system of government that you just have accepted. 30 years ago, black folk got the right to vote. You're not in any moral position to tell anybody how corrupt they are. You should be quiet and let those of us who know our people go there and help them get out of that condition. But America should keep her mouth shut wherever there's a corrupt regime, as much hell as America has raised on the earth.
Louis Farrakhan.
So there's a couple things, right? One, Louis Farrakhan, and we're going to bring in, of course, the resident historian, Brother Dwayne Omawale, the man, the myth, the legend, your favorite historian's favorite historian, your favorite Pan-Africanist, favorite Pan-Africanist. Peace, brother. Glad you to be here with us.
Yeah,
but
peace.
There's a couple of issues here. One, Louis Farrakhan is not an African American. He's West Indian. His father was from Jamaica. His mother was from St. Kitts. Right? Two, and Brother Dwayne can speak to this, Farrakhan isn't a Pan-Africanist, right? Farrakhan has a history of supporting very totalitarian, autocratic regimes on the African continent. Brother Dwayne.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, so when you sent me the clip, when I was watching it, that's one of the things that struck me, that when you actually look at Farrakhan's history in Africa, and I was thinking about, especially in the 90s, he did a friendship tour, and the friendship tour included, countries like Nigeria, like Sudan. These are countries that were under dictatorships. Matter of fact, the same Sudanese dictator, Omar Bashir, that Farrakhan met during his tour, and Farrakhan was very supportive of Bashir. He was so unpopular in Sudan that eventually he was overthrown by a popular revolution by the Sudanese people who were fed up with his dictatorship. So these are the type of leaders that Farrakhan is associating with. So it's interesting that Farrakhan, of all people, is being used as a representation of, as you pointed out, he's not even African-American, but he's being used as a representation of African-American Pan-Africanism when he is not a Pan-Africanist, and in fact his policies towards Africa are actually contrary to what it is that Pan-Africanists are trying to do in Africa. We're trying to get rid of these dictatorships, not align ourselves with them.
Right. So this speaks to, once again, as Brother Kevin talked about, when you're in the know, you would know that the claims that, of course, Oshay Duke Jackson has made in his video are adverse to fact. So we're going to continue the video, family.
Farrakhan shut Mike Wallace completely down in front of the entire nation on 60 Minutes. And so many people in Black America was rooting for Louis Farrakhan because he took the side of Nigeria. Louis Farrakhan didn't agree. He could have agreed with Mike Wallace, but he didn't. And the reason why he didn't, because in the 90s, that was the Black American stance with Africa. In the 80s, when Nelson Mandela got out of prison and basically took over the ANC, Black Americans were some of the biggest supporters of the ANC and of Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela rewarded Black Americans. There's actually a documentary right here on YouTube called Blacks Without Borders, Chasing the American Dream in South Africa, where you have Black Americans contributing a lot to the economy because our communities were closer back then. So what changed, Afro Think Tank?
The same FBA be talking about, that's what they do. Because FBA is a group of African Americans that don't care about Black people globally. They don't care about their race. They only care about their specific group of North American Africans that's in America. That's the only thing they care about. That's their priority.
He argues here the priority for foundational Black Americans is each other and not anybody else. Technically, he's right. Those Black Americans or African Americans who consider themselves #FBA, this is their priority. But from what I have shown you, that has not always been the priority. We see evidence that at a particular time, it was not this way. And I want to use Tariq Nasheed as an example. He also was not that way.
I've been all over Africa. Show me single parenthood in Africa today. You don't have a bunch of single mothers running around having babies just to be having them, or teen mothers in Africa, unless it's like a war-torn country. You don't have that. You don't have a bunch of incest going on over there in Africa. Go back into ancient Africa, especially West Africa. You didn't have dudes raping each other. You didn't have that. A lot of the stuff that we pick up, we got directly from being victimized by the white supremacists. That's a fact. Even our eating habits. Look at if you go back in history, Africans were the healthiest people on the planet.
Now, Tariq Nasheed.
So a couple things to unpack. One, Tariq Nasheed is not a Pan-Africanist. I will stand 10 toes down and state that he's never been a Pan-Africanist. However, he promoted the concept and idea of Pan-Africanism because it was financially expedient to do so. For example, Hidden Colors, right? We talk about 1804, right? This is an example of someone who's promoting these concepts because it's financially beneficial to do so. We find the same with the sister who's over ADOS, Yvette Cornell. However, when it was no longer financially viable for one to promote the concept and idea of Pan-Africanism, they shifted and turned to something else, right? Mr. Kevin aka Mr. K says, Oshay does armchair research, drawing info from YouTube videos and Google websites, as opposed to investigative research with a multidisciplinary approach. I would agree with you there. Yeah, so Jamal says, Dwayne is here, I'm blessed, absolutely. And then I think the brother said, love the intro was fire, appreciate it. So these are some of the issues, right? Most people, unfortunately, get the information from the University of YouTube. And of course, I'm saying that and I'm on YouTube as well, right? But what happens is much of the information they receive is misinformation, right? Or anecdotal perspectives. There's no really a deep dive in the research. And I'm going to shut up because I'm going to let Brother Dwayne speak regarding, of course, the clip that we see here regarding, of course, Tariq Nasheed.
What I'll start by saying is, yeah, obviously we're doing this on YouTube, but anybody who follows your platform, you very much encourage doing research outside of YouTube as well. And you've got a book for just about anything. So
this is true.
Yes,
and now here's the thing. Part of my books are here with me. This is you see an empty bookshelf. Some of them are back home being stored up in my parents' actual study. So I see the hit over there, but I miss my babies.
I had to cut the library in half.
Right, but yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So the clip with Tariq is the same thing he was doing with Farrakhan, where he's presenting Tariq Nasheed as if Tariq Nasheed was formerly a serious Pan-Africanist. But look at the clip he's using. Tariq Nasheed here is speaking about Africa in very vague terms, very romantic terms as well. He's basically romanticizing Africa. And when you talk about Hidden Colors, basically what he was doing during this phase where he supposedly was a Pan-Africanist was just promoting a very utopian, romanticized version of not even really African history, because when you look at Hidden Colors is not even an African history documentary. He's actually trying to claim European history, Asian history, and American history as Black history. He's trying to paint, these different historical figures as if they're Black. So he was never really a Pan-Africanist from the standpoint of being African-centered. And even in his clip, he's not a serious Pan-Africanist. He's just speaking about Africa in very vague, shallow terminology. So this is the type of misinformation that we see going on in this video, where Oshay's presenting these different individuals and then claiming them as Pan-Africanist. And if you don't know nothing about Pan-Africanism, you'll think like, okay, Farrakhan and Tariq Nasheed are representatives of Pan-Africanists. But for those of us who are in the Pan-African movement, Tariq Nasheed has never been viewed as a serious Pan-Africanist, and Louis Farrakhan is not a Pan-Africanist. And as you play clips and continue through the video, something that I've noticed is the lack of references to actual Pan-Africanists. In the video, he continues to speak about Pan-Africanism in a very broad, very abstract type of manner, and he doesn't give specific examples as to who he's talking about and what he's talking about concerning Pan-Africanism.
Very good, very good. So we are going to continue the video.
He is giving Africa props. He's talking about the things that he sees that are beneficial in Africa that he doesn't see here. And largely, there are many things that I can agree with him on, especially when it comes to the family setting. Yeah, there's a lot of things that Africa does right, to be honest. But then how did Tariq Nasheed go from...
So very quickly, family, he says a lot of things that Africa does right? Africa is a diverse continent of 55 nation states. right? So you see once again the lack of, as Brother Kevin, aka Mr. K, would say, methodological research, the lack of ability to actually pinpoint and make a claim and substantiate that claim. They're speaking in very broad and grandiose terms. And that really is a representative of someone who has a very surface level understanding of whatever issue they're talking about, right? Just want to make you all aware of that.
That to this.
People are desperate with trying to force us to identify as an African. Now, racially, we're African people. Racially, ethnically, we are a different group. Ethnically, we're foundational Black Americans.
Now, in this case, Tariq Nasheed is still arguing that he has ancestrally African DNA, but he.
So here's the issue. This is back to the, and Dwayne and I, we was connected about this yesterday. This is the boogeyman. They are trying to make us have this African identity. Who the French toast is they? Who are you talking about? Right? Who the French toast are you talking about? Don't speak in these very vague and abstract terms, right? Trying to make it seem like somehow it's problematic for you to identify, right? I appreciate the love, Kevin, aka Mr. K, with being African, embracing your African heritage, your African identity. Somehow it's problematic, and they are behind it. But who the French toast is they? Right? This is the boogeyman concept. Yeah. Here's a banger book for you: Pan-Africanism, Evolution, Progress, and Prospects. Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Oh, I'm going to have to check that out.
And the funny thing about that is, according to the logic of the video, Tariq Nasheed was formerly a Pan-Africanist, so we'd have to assume, based on what the video is presenting, that Tariq Nasheed is part of the day.
Yes. Yeah. So let's continue, family.
Also argues for something different.
I acknowledge my African racial inherent DNA and the connection I have with other African descended people globally. We have a connection as far as intrinsic race and biology. So I acknowledge that. No problem with that. When I travel to Africa or any other place where there are Black people, I see a commonality with that. But we're also a people who have a very unique ethnic background, and that's us being foundational Black Americans. That goes just beyond the skin tone.
The argument that he has is, while we are genetically the same, and when I do feel drawn to certain Blacks, when I see them, we are a different ethnic group. Now, it's always been the case that we are a different ethnic group, but now there is a difference. And that difference is what you consider delineation. In the last 8 to 9 years, Tariq Nasheed has been pushing for this level of delineation from the Black world. And many people have accused him of grifting. And to be honest, I could see that before. But to be honest, I'm gonna tell you why I don't think that anymore. Number one, if Tariq Nasheed wanted to be a grifter, it was much easier to do that under the umbrella of Pan-Africanism. Why not talk about a message that everybody else is talking about, and then you could extend your influence to all over the world? I mean, he could be in Nigeria, he could be in South Africa, he could produce his films here in America, and he wouldn't just be alienating himself to one community. So for him to push delineation, it actually hurts him monetarily, because
And so here I would disagree. Right, because we know that initially he was pushing a very vague idea and concept of Pan-Africanism because it's financially lucrative to do so. But when it was no longer financially lucrative to do so, when the well dried up, right, and he wasn't able to produce any new films, he changed, of course, the talking points. And I've stated this before on a number of platforms that when we listen to Tariq Nasheed, he typically reinvents himself every 2 to 3 years, as Brother Dwayne would say, like a rapper, right? When he first came out, he was talking about he was a melanated person, and then it shifted to he was a Moor, right? Then it shifted to what? We're African people, and now he's FBA. So we tend to find that he also tends to create a problem, and then the solution to the problem is to buy a product from him. The problem is we don't know our history. Our history's been hidden. Buy this DVD. The problem is we don't really know the history about the Haitian Revolution, even though there's numerous text by, of course, Black authors about the Haitian Revolution, most notably Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, but why buy my DVD, right? Oh, we need to delineate. Guess what? Now we have our own flag. Buy the flag from me, right? So we tend to find that whenever he creates a problem, right, promotes that problem, and then guess what? Sells a product as a result, as a solution. Same thing when he said, "Hey, family, we don't have any private live." He said that we didn't have any private museums in the Black community, which of course is adverse to facts. I can think of one right off my head. That's the Charles Wright Black African American History Museum in Detroit, Michigan. Shout out to the 313 if anyone's watching, right? But as a result, most people aren't aware of this. I went there when I was a child and I was in middle school, right? Oh, he's right. We donate money to him. He makes money off of creating a problem in the Black community that actually doesn't exist. What are your thoughts about that, Brother Dwayne?
Yeah, I would have to agree. That's exactly what he does, and that's why that argument is funny to me. That if he wanted to, be a grifter, he would have stayed a Pan-Africanist. When FBA is basically Tariq Nasheed's brand, as you pointed out. He sells merchandise off of it. He sells T-shirts. He sells sold flags.
Yeah, when you go to the website, there's nothing policy oriented on the website. It's simply what products to purchase from him, literally.
Yeah, so but here's the great part about how this grift works, though, is because it's his brand, but according to him, it's a lineage. It belongs to all Black Americans who want to claim that lineage. So he can't do that with Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is a movement with an established history. We know Umar Johnson's been trying to claim that he's the prince of Pan-Africanism, but there's no one leader of Pan-Africanism. But with FBA, Tariq Nasheed has the perfect type of brand where he can create this movement and then market it as a lineage, so people don't look at him as he's the leader of the movement. But the reality is that's what it is. He's the leader of FBA. It's his brand. It's a movement that he's built. I mean, basically, it's a movement he actually hijacked from Yvette Carnell. But this idea that it would be easier for him to grift as a Pan-Africanist, it doesn't make any sense to me. The type of things that he's been selling with FBA, he couldn't do with Pan-Africanism.
Right. So this is the website here, family. It states right here. This is a non-organizational status, right? This is the website. This is a legal disclaimer. Official stance on entrapment or online manipulation. But when you go to the website, right, all it is products to buy. You have snapbacks. You have the flag, dark flag, white flag. You have the FBA Black Power mini flag. You have a hard copy of his book. Right, you have the FBA Nation Maroon flag. Right, we know Maroon societies were prevalent throughout the African diaspora, from Virginia, as far north as Virginia to far south as Brazil, right, in Argentina. Dr. Wilson T-shirts, right, FBA bandana, large foundational Black American flag, right, foundational Black American mini flag. So all of this is what? T-shirts, right? It's simply selling products. That's all he's doing. Yeah, so then he talks about, I have respect, I connect with Black people from other places, but then he's here calling Black people from other places tethers. Right, so I just want to show this because, many people may say, hey, can you substantiate the claims that you're making? Absolutely, right? So this is all about, of course, making money. Let's see here. I don't think that the Pan-African well dried up. Umar has been benefiting fine from it. I think COINTELPRO leadership made a deal with him to cause division, same for Yvette and Tone. And you know what, brother? I appreciate you saying that. That's a great point. That's a great point. You may be right. I mean, it is some agent behavior, but I don't like to call people agents because, you don't want to make a claim that you can substantiate. We started out with Huey Newton, and we said that about Kwame Ture, and he did later admit that he had no evidence to substantiate that claim. But that is a very good point. Very good point. So we're going to start back with the video, family. Very good point.
one-sided. Now, it is getting a little bit better, but it's
So we need to address, and I'm sorry, family, I didn't share the video. You all can see the video. Couple things. One, and Mr. K, I hope you tap in here. He says that he's in the Pan-African community. If he was in the Pan-African community, he would know that Pan-Africanism is not one-sided. It has a history of not being one-sided. And he's going to mention something about Tariq Nasheed wasn't able to get dual citizenship in Zimbabwe. There are over 24 African nations I can think of off the top of my head where if you are a member of the African diaspora, you can, of course, get dual citizenship. The other issue is you have to look at just because you go to an African nation to ask for dual citizenship, and they reject you, doesn't mean that Pan-Africanism isn't working. You have to look at why that government isn't providing dual citizenship. They may not be in a position to do so. The presidential administration may not be Pan-Africanist in nature, right? So for example, if I go to a mosque or masjid and say, I'm a Christian, pray with me, and then people say, well, we're not praying to Jesus because we're Muslim, not Christian. And I say, well, see, I went to this mosque and they wouldn't pray with me. That's an example of Christians not being united. But they are Christians to begin with. You're making a presumption just because they're in a religious institution, right, that they're supposed to somehow agree with you. So there's a number of issues here. Brother Dwayne, would you like to address the misnomer that Pan-Africanism is one-sided?
I mean, to be honest, to really address that would require an entire show by itself, because obviously there's a very lengthy history of these connections. But to talk about this particular example, this was one that actually caught my interest when I watched the video the first time, because with the work that I do in Togo, and I'm still working trying to make that connection so we can have Sister Sarita in here. But when I connected with her and I was working with her, her vision for Togo is actually dual citizenship. She wants right of return for the African diaspora. So obviously the government of Togo doesn't support that, because the government of Togo really is not serious about Pan-Africanism. So the issue with Tariq is, if he was going to Zimbabwe and the government was against dual citizenship or wasn't providing it, well, who are the Pan-Africanists in Zimbabwe that he's connecting to that actually want that? Because I could speak from the example of Togo that my work in Togo is not to connect with the government there. My work in Togo is to connect with the Pan-Africanists who are grassroots political activists. And that goes back to the issue of people thinking Pan-Africanism is one-sided. Obviously, it's going to seem one-sided if you go to Africa and try to connect with people who aren't Pan-Africanist. But if you go to Africa and you're working with Pan-Africanists, it's a different experience. So I think that's part of the dishonesty that we see in this video, where he's trying to present Tariq Nasheed being rejected by a government that's not a Pan-African government as Pan-Africanism is one-sided, or people in Africa aren't serious about practicing Pan-Africanism in a way that's beneficial to African Americans. And another example that I can give is when I was working with Africans Rising, it's a Pan-African organization based on the continent. One of the things that they used to do during African Liberation Day is they would actually fund African Liberation Day celebrations. So if you were an activist or an organization in the United States and you want to do an African Liberation Day event, Africans Rising would provide funding for it. So obviously it can be one-sided if this is a Pan-African organization on the continent willing to provide funding to African Americans. But one of the issues with this video is it speaks about Pan-Africanism in a very vague and an abstract way, and it doesn't actually specifically name who the Pan-Africanists on the continent are.
Correct. Absolutely. And family, if anyone else wants to tap in, you can do so. The link is in the description, and I will put the link in the chat now. But just something to, of course, be cognizant of. And then, of course, we could, of course, go ad nauseum about some of the examples of Pan-Africanism being not one-sided, but I would do so, right? We talk about Pete O'Neill, of course, Black Panther in Kansas City, Missouri, being able to, of course, have political refuge in Tanzania, right? We could talk about, of course, Asylum Shakur in Cuba. We can talk about, of course, during the administration of Kwame Nkrumah, that was a Pan-Africanist government, and there was numerous African Americans who worked in the Nkrumah administration in Ghana. We could talk about Algeria, right, providing, of course, refuge for political activists here in the West. We could talk about a great example of would be in Libya, of course, Muammar Gaddafi provided a $5 million interest-free loan to Louis Farrakhan. So there was no benefit for him. It wasn't like he was charging him interest, $5 million interest-free loan. We could talk about, of course, African diplomats putting pressure on the U.S. State Department during the 1960s to, of course, eradicate Jim Crow segregation, what we like to call de jure segregation in, of course, the American South, right? So these are actual examples of Pan-Africanism not being one-sided. Once again, as I said before, if we wanted, we could go ad nauseum regarding, of course, the Pan-Africanism not being one-sided. But this is the type of claims people make because they are unable, once again, unable to make claims that are true. Nova, if you could simply cam up in the queue, just to make sure you're not trolling, I will then bring you into the chat. So if you could cam up in queue, it'd be greatly appreciated. Just to make sure you're not trolling, and then I will bring you into the live. So please, if you can, cam up in queue, and then I will bring you into the live.
Also costing Black Americans a lot more. And Pan-Africanism comes at a greater cost for Black Americans. For example, whenever you talk to Black Americans about Africa, you always hear this: oh, you need to come back to your roots. You need to come back home. What that tells a Black American psychologically is what they know about themselves now is not really them. You need to get in contact with your true self, which is Africa, in which you'll really be home and you'll really understand who you are. In other words, who you are now is fake. And so that creates a level of self-doubt. So
that is absolutely nonsensical, right? That who you are is fake, right? Is nonsensical. So here's the reality situation. And we're going to put this in an academic vein. There are two fathers of consensus fathers of Black history in the academy: Dr. Carter G. Woodson, Dr. John Hope Franklin, right? When you open an African American history textbook, and Brother Dwayne, you are learned, brother, and family, if you're watching, you are learned as well. When you open an African American history textbook, where does the history start? Brother Dwayne.
Oh, that wasn't a rhetorical question.
No, it's not rhetorical.
So typically that history actually would start in Africa, and I'm thinking about what's the book called? The Negro in Our History by Carter G. Woodson. He actually does begin that book in Africa.
And why Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is the father of Black history, the creator of a solid association for the study of African American history, and the creator of Negro History Week, which later became Black History Month, why does he begin the history of African Americans in Africa?
Because that's where the history of African Americans began.
Right. And if you start your history here in America, it reinforces what nonsensical white supremacists believe and talking point.
That our history began in slavery, and it also reinforces the point that slavery was a benefit, because it creates the perception that we had no history in Africa, nothing was going on in Africa, so we entered the stage of world history through enslavement.
Right. Absolutely. So once again, family, you can see that Oshay Duke Jackson is getting a lot wrong on his video regarding what is wrong with Pan-Africanism.
And I'll add another issue as well, and it's great that you mentioned Carter G. Woodson, because a lot of the Pan-African scholarship, particularly from African Americans, has always been to identify African Americans as a unique group. It's never been the type of scholarship that looks at African Americans as a people who are so disconnected from an African identity that you have to go back to Africa to find who you are. And it's something that you've spoken about on your show often, that there were a lot of cultural retentions among African Americans. So it wasn't the case that slavery completely robbed African Americans of a sense of African identity. So I think he's also replicating what I think are certain white supremacist talking points.
Oh, absolutely.
Americans were completely stripped of African culture to the point where you have to go back to Africa to even reclaim or reconnect with the cultures if you don't have it. And the other thing that I was thinking about watching the video as well is particularly with an organization such as the Republic of New Africa, they were able to, redefine an African American identity, but in a way that was more deeply rooted in Pan-Africanism and more deeply rooted in an African-centered approach. So it's interesting that FBA, they always frame delineation as becoming more American rather than being more African, because the Republic of New Africa demonstrated you can engage in delineation in a way where you're becoming more African or more African-centered. They were trying to create an independent African nation for African Americans. So, this idea that Pan-Africanism promotes the idea that African Americans have no identity, have no history, and have to physically go to Africa to reconnect to a sense of identity. It's completely
nonsensical.
Yeah, it's completely nonsensical, but it's nonsensical, obviously, from the standpoint of the intellectual tradition of African Americans. But as I pointed out, even the political tradition of African Americans would indicate a sense of trying to assert an identity here in the United States as a unique African people, or as the Republic of New Africa put it, the New African people.
Right. So, yeah, it's not only nonsensical, it's also ahistorical and averse to facts. The other issue that I think, when we talk about this, and the brother talked about how the intro was fired, there's a clip on the intro of a number of books that, of course, substantiate African cultural retention and African American culture. Right? We know Melville Herskovitz is known for his book, The Myth of the Negro Past. That was one of the more prominent texts. But there were numerous books written by, of course, Booker T. Washington, and even, of course, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. I talked about the, of course, African cultural retention and African American culture. So, one of the greatest examples of that we find is, of course, kente cloth. Right? Kente cloth is an example of African cultural retention. We could talk about another example of that would be, of course, in Black churches, you have what's called shouting. That comes from the ring shout in the Congo. We could talk about call and response. Like, if anyone has ever gone to a non-Black religious institution, they don't do call and response, right? That is an example of African cultural retention, right? We talk about pouring libation, right? When we pour something for the dead homies, you know what I mean? That is an example of African cultural retention that is directly derived from honoring one's ancestors with, of course, alcohol or, of course, water. So there are a number of examples of African cultural retention. But this is why it's important, family, that we do not, keyword, do not get our information from, of course, professors from the University of YouTube, because typically they don't know what the French toast are talking about. And Kevin, aka Mr. K, says Oshay just displayed the fallacy checklist of poisoning the well, making sweeping generalizations, jumping to hasty conclusions, blanket statements, straw man arguments relating to African Africans. Absolutely, to say that Pan-Africanism makes the argument that African Americans' identity is fake. This is absolutely nonsensical. But this is what happens when you have individuals who, I would argue, aren't well versed, well read, or well educated on a particular subject matter that they're speaking on, right? So just something, once again, to consider, family. And this is, I would argue, really scary, because this video has, give me 1 second, family, over 19,000 views. So this means that this is a man who is extremely influential, but he's influencing people by providing misinformation, which is extremely dangerous and problematic.
So Africans who are already into Africa, they are the true Africans, and they don't need to find out who they are, but you need to find out who you are. So it automatically pushes you in a situation where you must be immersed in with them. But this doesn't happen for other Africans on the continent. When you see Eritreans in Uganda, or certain Somalians in East Africa, they already know who they are, so that can't be beat with them or used against them as leverage. But this tactic is always used on Black Americans as leverage, and it costs Black Americans a lot of money, and it also stresses Black Americans mentally. We need to go back to our motherland where we feel that we are home, but in actuality, you're not going to be treated as if you are home. And it forces you to cover territory that Africans don't have to cover. You have to invest on getting to know who you are, because you're somewhere looking for your lost father.
So once again, he's making a number of claims that are just false, that you're looking for your lost father. So if you are an African-American man or woman who does not know their daddy, you're going to travel all the way to Africa to try to find them? I mean, come on, like, seriously, that's ridiculous, right? So this is the nonsense that's being promoted from these individuals who are promoting, of course, FBA ADOS. Nonsense. So if I don't know my dad, and everyone who knows, I do know my father, my parents have been married 48 years, and that's why I did a very glowing and rather emotionally strident Father's Day show about my dad, right? But if I didn't know my father, I'm going to go all the way to Africa. I'm going to take a 10-hour flight from JFK or Washington, D.C. to find my daddy. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And here's the thing, and you can speak to this, Brother Dwayne, because you're, of course, a member of the African diaspora from Guyana. I'm a member of the African diaspora. I'm an African American. When I got to know about my history and culture and heritage, I didn't actually go to Africa. I began to study. Am I right or wrong? So Malcolm X talked about having a cultural revolution right before a political one. And to do that, if you ever read the charter to the Organization of African American Unity, he states that we need to do what? We need to study and learn as much as we can about our history, learn as much as we can about our culture, and also as much as we can about what was done to us. Oshay, Black Power. So let's keep it moving.
You're somewhere looking for your lost mother, even though your lost father or your lost mother is the one that sold you. Tariq Nasheed points.
Once again, anyone who's done a cursory study of the transatlantic slave trade, and I've done a deep dive in the transatlantic slave trade, would know that that statement is absolutely false, nonsensical. Your long lost mother or father sold you. So let's break down the transatlantic slave trade. And I'm going to give some examples, or as we stay here in these YouTube streets, we need some receipts. And Brother Dwayne, as you're the historian. I'm just a scholar, but you're the historian. My warehouse, of course, is higher education. But help a brother out here if you see me slipping. Top of the transatlantic slave trade. The norm in the transatlantic slave trade was that prisoners of war were sold to, of course, European traders, right? Now, many of these wars took place as a result of proxy wars being fomented by what? Whites. Right or wrong, Dwayne?
That's right.
Like a great example of individuals not selling their kin, not selling their son or daughter, not selling their member of their own ethnicity or nationality is in the home. Where the actual state law was what? You can't enslave someone if they're the homie. So once again, this is him. He's making claims that are averse to facts and 100% ahistorical. This is why these type of individuals are extremely dangerous. This is why when I try to reach out to these so-called brothers, with air quotes, they will not, keyword family, will not interview with me. They won't come on the platform. They won't answer questions because they know they don't know what the French toast, shout out to Kevin Sanders family, what they're talking about. Because we find this in the black community, and I'm gonna shut up and let you cook.
All right.
We find this in the black community where individuals know most black people, because we are victims of the public miseducation system, do not know much about their own history, heritage, and culture. We know about a lot about everybody else. This is why Dr. Carter G. Woodson wrote the book in 1933, Miseducation of the Negro. And so as a result, they utilize, they manipulate, they take advantage of people's ignorance. And then make claims that, of course, are averse to facts. And then gain a following. The Nation of Islam was probably the first to popularize doing that. Yeah, I said it, the Nation of Islam, NOI, FOA, and what FOI, they ain't gonna do nothing. I know how to get down. They know who I am. Right? This is a reality. And it causes more harm. It doesn't help. It actually does harm. Brother Dwayne, go right ahead.
Yes, I was going to say the other problem with that claim, it's a gross oversimplification of the history of the slave trade, because what he's trying to do is present the history as African Americans were all descendants of those who were captured and sold, and the Africans on the continent were all the sellers. Part of the problem with that is many Africans who were engaged in the slave trade actually were themselves captured and sold. A very popular example of this in the Caribbean was an African slave trader known as Daga. Daga was actually captured and enslaved and brought to Trinidad, and he was a slave trader. And this was not uncommon. There were several cases where Africans who actually engaged in trading other Africans were captured and enslaved. So some of us are actually descendants of the slave traders as well as those who were captured. And the other problem with that is when Africans in the diaspora began returning back to Africa, they were welcome home as family, because Africans on the continent were also losing friends and family members in the slave trade as well. So for the early Africans who were returning back to Africa from the diaspora, the Africans on the continent weren't looking at them as, oh, you're the people we sold away. They're looking at them as, you're the descendants of our ancestors that were captured and sold away. And a great book on this is by a Jamaican, Robert Campbell, called A Pilgrimage to My Motherland. Mm-hmm. Basically, in that book, he's writing about actually going back to West Africa, which is current day Nigeria, And he said everywhere he went in Africa, he was treated like family, and that was the reason why, because the people in West Africa looked at him as long lost kin who was descendants of those who captured and sold away. So for him to frame it as if you're going back to Africa, you're just going back to the people who sold you, is, like I said, the gross over simplification. And as you've consistently been pointing out, it's actually ahistorical. When you look at the history of the slave trade, as I pointed out, many of the slave traders were actually captured and sold, and Africans were very welcoming and accepting of the diaspora because they see us as the descendants of their family members who were
absolutely. I mean, that's been my experience when I've traveled to the continent. We talk about Martin Delaney, Malcolm X, right? They gave him the name. It was Omawale, am I right?
Yep.
Right? Pun intended there, right? Right. So of course, we talk about in Chad, right? Of course, and once again, I'm cooking and I'm building on the information that I've learned from Brother Dwayne Omawale. The political party that led to helped lead Chad to gain the independence from France was created by a brother who was what? From Panama. And he became the head of the political party, if I'm right or wrong. And he was from Panama. Bring your ass over here. You down for the cause? Let's get it. Let's go. Right? Something to consider. So also, Kevin, aka Mr. K, says, notice how he persists to only use impoverished imagery of Africa and Africans in the background. Remember what Malcolm X said about the science of imagery propaganda by the West to smear Africa's image. Absolutely. I have a number of books on that. Mistaking Africa by Curtis Clem. I have the second and third edition of his text where he talks about, once again, of course, in America, people having very negative views of Africa as impoverished, so on and so forth. And part of that, of course, is to dissuade people from having interest in what's taking place on the African continent, not only politically, but also economically as well. So, but once again, we see that. And it's not because there's a brother that I look up to, he has a very strong platform. He focuses on issues that affect Black men. And he shared with me, he said, man, he just put out, Oshay Duke Jackson put out a great video about the problems of Pan-Africanism. So I said, I'll have to check it out. And so I checked it out. I'm like, nah, he don't know what the hell he's talking about. This is a horrible video. Right? So, and I explained to him why. Of course, the claims he was making were nonsensical. But once again, painting with a broad brush, having a very monolithic view of the African continent, but also a very negative view of the African continent. I just never knew, I've never in my life, in all of my times of studying and doing research, heard of an African American traveling to the African continent to find their long lost mother or father. Ever in the history of African Americans. Right? So here we go. So let's finish, family.
Without frustration with African governments and diaspora connections. Tariq Nasheed points out how unfair African governments are towards Black Americans when it comes to dual citizenship. I believe many years ago he was arguing for this in Zimbabwe, and he could not make it happen, and that's probably one of the reasons why he went in the direction that he did. He also argues that the promises of Pan-Africanism, which is solidarity, shared rights, mutual support between Africa and the diaspora, haven't been fulfilled in a way that benefits the diaspora. And this is actually true. There is no fairness in Pan-Africanism in practice. And so
there's no fairness in Pan-Africanism in practice. So let's talk about the stages of Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism began during the Holocaust of enslavement, in which Africans in the diaspora, enslaved Africans and their descendants longed for their homeland. It mutated into advocacy for human rights and, of course, decolonization and political independence, political and economic independence. We now see that the push for Pan-Africanism now is for good governance, right? And we find that everywhere African people are, if it doesn't matter if you're on the continent, the Caribbean, of course, the European Union, Australia, the Pacific Islands, or even here in the good old US of A, there's an advocacy for good governance, that we elect Black officials that have our best interests at heart. Nova, I need you to, of course, cam up and cue, and then I can bring you into the live. So conscious, unconscious, I need you to cam up and cue, and then I will bring you into live, but I need you to cam up and cue before I bring you into the live. Just have to make sure you're not scamming. These are some of the issues that of course, we're looking at. But we've already provided examples of course, Pan-Africanism, of course, being mutually beneficial. But if one negative experience leads you to go in the opposite direction, then I would argue that you never were Pan-Africanist to begin with. For example, you have individuals who are Christians. In a person's Christian walk or journey, they're going to have negative experiences at different churches and with different Christians. But that should not change your faith in Jesus. Would you agree with that, Brother Dwayne?
Yeah.
Right. So once again, this is an issue in which I would argue he was a Pan-Africanist because he was seeking out some type of personal benefit, not benefit for the race, not for the betterment of the race, but for his own personal benefit or largesse. So just something to once again consider there when we talk about the arguments that he's making. When he talks about fairness and Pan-Africanism, as we stated before, there's a long history of Africans on the continent advocating politically at the state level for, of course, the human rights for African Americans. Another example would be Malcolm X, when he was seeking to, of course, have the United Nations charge the United States of America for human rights violations for the treatment of African Americans, and he had the backing of 5 African nations: Ghana, I believe Senegal maybe was another, Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia. So it may have been 6, right? So once again, this brother does not know what he's talking about. We could talk about in Burkina Faso. We talk about, of course, Thomas Sankara, of course, 5th president of Burkina Faso. When he came to the United States in 1984, he was denied a official state visit at the White House because the Reagan administration took umbrage with his Pan-Africanist ethos. He subsequently the next day traveled to New York City and he spoke at Harriet Tubman Elementary School in Harlem. Shout out to Harlem, right? And this video of him speaking at the Harriet Tubman Elementary School is on my channel, family. So you can go on the channel, LaMovaSpeaks.com, and view the video for yourself. And he stated, for the African Revolutionary, my White House is in Black Harlem. He said that our fight against neocolonialism is consistent with your fight against anti-Black racism here in America. He says that anyone wants to repatriate to Burkina Faso, you are welcome, and we will pay your way. We talk about Pan-Africanism. Haiti, right? Shout out to Haiti. I believe Haitians are the greatest African people on the planet Earth. We know what they did in 1804, from 1791 to 1804, when they had to get down, right? When they had that blicky, right? When they was about their life, right? When they wanted that smoke, and they said, we are the smoke. Get this work, right? For over a century, the Haitian government stated that Black people in any country in the Western Hemisphere were Haitian citizens, and they provided funding for the transportation and housing, transportation for the relocation and housing of African Americans in Haiti, particularly in Port-au-Prince, and with Bishop James C. Holly led a large contingent, over 10,000 African Americans, to resettle. That is an example of Pan-Africanism not being one-sided. So if you all see Dr. Oshay Duke Jackson, before I do, tell him to shut the fuck up, right? Kevin, aka Mr. K, Oshay clearly never listened to the Rebirth of a Nation speech by MLK in 1957 about the African independence influence on the civil rights movement, the connection between the two. Very true. I am familiar with that as well. Absolutely. But they stated that they were able to draw inspiration and knowledge from, of course, the African independence movement. And of course, that played a role in the civil rights movement. So let's keep it going.
Africanism is unfair. There is only one way to make it fair. That is delineation. And see, this is never addressed. Afro Think Tank never addresses this. Pan-Africanists who have a problem with Tariq Nasheed's rhetoric never addresses this. Now, this isn't to say that I agree with all of Tariq Nasheed, what he does, and some of the name calling he has against other groups. Clearly, I don't agree with that. But when he talks about pure ideology, this cannot be debunked. What happens is people try to force African Americans or Black Americans into flat Blackness.
Peace to the tribe. So one of the reasons why I don't identify as any of these new online self-identifiers like Salon, FBA, and ADOS is because they're all ideologies with hidden agendas. So Black Americans are delineating because we want to focus on ourselves. We want our own spaces that are solely for Black Americans, and we don't have to ask for these things. We don't need permission. We have been through so much in this country, and it's okay to love only us and embrace our culture, our history, and our heritage.
Shout out to my brother from Secure the Tribe. He's on.
So there's a couple issues there, right? They talk about trying to force Black people to engage in flat Blackness. Once again, this is the boogeyman concept. They aren't naming or providing examples of anyone who's trying to force Black African Americans to do this. The second issue is, and this is something that is a real concern for me, is the tribalism, right? Kwame Nkrumah taught us that if we are tribalistic or nationalistic in our ethos, rather than Pan-Africanist in nature, we'll be played against each other like pawns on a chessboard. I wrote an article about this on Medium titled "I'm Blacker Than You," where we really see this comes down really to resource deprivation. There's a fear of a lack of access to resources, and as a result, you turn on individuals who are a soft target, right? Rather than the entity that is responsible for, of course, our social, economic, and political quagmire, which of course is the United States government. What say you, Brother Dwayne?
It goes back to the point I made before about the Republic of New Africa, that you can create a unique Black or African identity for yourself that's still Pan-African and still inclusive. So, and this is where what this video is doing is very misleading and dishonest, because it essentially is trying to argue that either you have this flat blackness, this concept of just African people being a universal people without any distinctions, or you have what FBA is trying to do. And the reality is, within the Pan-African movement, we've always acknowledged the fact that African people globally are people with very diverse culture. We're not 100% the same, anywhere in the world. We're a very diverse people in that way. So it's trying to create, this false narrative that's not really rooted in what Pan-Africanism has ever been. Pan-Africanism has never been rooted in this idea that we're all just flat Black people that have the same culture, 100% of the same culture, 100% of the same history. That Pan-Africanism has always acknowledged the uniqueness of African people. And as I pointed out, you can do that and still be Pan-African and still acknowledge the importance of African unity. You can, and that's why I keep using the example of the Republic of New Africa as an example of how that could look within the African-American context. So this, as I pointed out, this was an organization that tried to create a unique national identity for African-Americans, but it did so in a Pan-African context. So, as I pointed out, it's a false narrative that that Pan-Africanism is trying to promote this concept of flat Blackness. And it's not even FBA. It's actually something that I remember Yvette Carnell has been claiming. And to this day, I've never seen an example of a specific example of where Pan-Africanism or Pan-Africanists actually promote this idea of a flat Blackness, or what flat Blackness even means. I think it's something that Yvette Carnell might have coined in FBA.
Right.
So, but it's very dishonest.
Absolutely. So, Nova, once again, I need you to cam up and cue so I can bring you into the live. Here's the thing. When has there been a time in history when African Americans, okay, got you. I will bring you in. When African Americans celebrate their American history and identity, Oshay insinuates that it's always been all eyes on Africa and Black America. Something to, of course, consider. You can turn your camera off now, brother. Absolutely. So let's finish the video.
TikTok, check him out. He always has some really good stuff. I'm trying to interview him one of these days. Like I said, shout out to the young brother, right? And he makes a point that, listen, we don't want to be under flat Blackness because we want to make sure that we are who we are. For so long, we've been worried about somebody else. And that's what flat Blackness does. Flat Blackness makes a single undifferentiated identity, right? And basically all Black people think, live, or struggle in the same way. And this produces flat Blackness. And this is a problem because it hides structural inequalities inside Black communities. It lets brands or governments claim inclusion without addressing real diversity. It causes tension between African Americans, continental Africans, and Caribbeans because we are expected to have certain identical outlooks. And this is what Pan-Africanism tries to do. Pan-Africanism tries to establish flat Blackness. And in order for all Blacks to kind of work together, you kind of have to establish flat Blackness. And I get it to a certain level, but at the same time, it doesn't give any real value to many Black Americans in the same way, because you are pushing flat Blackness. And when you push flat Blackness on a whole group, you diminish their issues and you diminish their problems. But here's the flip side. Africans and Caribbeans don't really agree with flat Blackness. They typically are themselves. They claim themselves. Go and look at their Instagram pages and look at their flags they have. They don't agree to this, but Black Americans somehow must agree to this, all right? 3, Tariq Nasheed reframes his focus towards foundational Black Americans. The broad flat Blackness diaspora framing dilutes specific history and reparations orientation of Black Americans that come from slavery, all right? If you continue with flat Blackness, you can allow a Nigerian American or a Jamaican American also get reparations for Black
So once again, he's making claims that are averse to facts, right? Once again, we've already debunked the concept of Pan-Africanism promoting blackness, right? One of the things that Pan-Africanism promotes is that wherever you are in the world, you should work with Black people to improve our conditions, right? Doesn't promote flat blackness. He talks about promoting, of course, reparations. What we find problematic here is that there's been really no talk about reparations because they have no, as he said before, they're not a political organization. It's a lineage. This is on the website. We already brought up the website. And so there's been no discussion about reparations. In fact, they, at one point, when they were trying to come off like a political organization, they had some type of conference with FBA, and they came together and started physically fighting with each other. Am I right or wrong, Brother Dwayne?
Yeah, I remember
Literally,
that.
there was only FBA people there, and they started fighting with each other. Physically, not there wasn't a verbal jousting, there wasn't any, intellectual debates. They were literally physically attacking each other. What the French folks are we talking about here? And so now the focus is, but once again, yes, this concept, notice how he never names the actual Pan-Africanists who preach flat blackness. Hence, Pan-Africanism is an imaginary boogeyman. Facts. Right, he never provides any tangible examples to substantiate the claims that he's making. Right, I've been a Pan-Africanist for the past 20 years. I've never in my life, I was introduced to Pan-Africanism by an elder from Liberia, by a mother from South Africa. And they never preached flat blackness to me, ever. They never told me I should shrink the fact or not be proud of the fact that I was an African American. Right? So he's making claims that, of course, are averse to fact. The fact that a former professed pimp is leading intellectual or the leading intellectual of our ideology is crazy work. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's finish this off.
Black American or hashtag FBA or hashtag the original Negro or the original Afro-American reparations bit. And that's the issue. And people will do that. People will use flat blackness to benefit from Black Americans, but will never give anything back.
Once again, provide an example of someone who's not an African American trying to get reparations in America. I'm just asking for one example.
But the other problem with this as well, he just finished saying that people in the Caribbean don't practice flat blackness, that people in the Caribbean promote their nationality. But the issue with that is, to use the example he gave of a Nigerian, if a Nigerian were to move to any Caribbean country, they would actually be eligible for reparations under the Caribbean's reparation claim. So that within the Caribbean, we're not trying to distinguish African people to the point where if you're not from the Caribbean, you're not a national by origin, you can't get reparations. So FBA is trying to do this, and I said it's very misleading, dishonest. They're trying to do a thing where they're trying to essentially say that what they're doing is the same as what Black people from the Caribbean are doing, but really it's not the same. It's much more divisive, because when they're talking about reparations, they're specifically trying to bar other groups of African people from reparations in a way that's not being done in the Caribbean.
Right. So once again, making claims that are averse to facts.
And lastly, Tariq Nasheed points out that neo-colonial African states do not care about their own citizens. All right. So he's skeptical about Pan-Africanism. If you do not care about your own citizens in Africa, how can you care about Black Americans?
Well, here's the problem. They're making the presumption that that nation, that the political leadership in that country is Pan-Africanist in nature. Right? No one is telling you to go work with someone who's trying to align themselves with the former colonial powers in the West, Western powers, to benefit themselves at the chagrin of their citizens. It's nonsensical. So once again, this is a straw man argument.
He's skeptical of Pan-Africanism because of the actions of people who are not Pan-Africanist.
Exactly. Say that one more time. He is skeptical of Pan-Africanism due to the actions of people who are not Pan-Africanists. Makes no sense whatsoever. Classic case of gaslighting. Yeah, that would be tantamount to me. Of course, I have an issue with feminism, but me being skeptical of feminism based on the actions of someone who's not a feminist. But I'm skeptical of feminism because Barack Obama, his actions as president. Well, what the hell does Barack Obama being president have to do with feminism? This is the type of nonsense that's taking place.
Many, if not all, African governments are failing their own populations, so you will definitely fail Black Americans, not because you're trying to, but because you're already failing. So then how can the Black diaspora or Black Americans trust you? These are arguments that Pan-Africanists tend to not want to address. And me as a person in the Pan-African community, I'm not arguing in bad faith. If I feel that my positions can change, they have changed. It doesn't mean that I'm not in the Pan-African community, but I do want the truth. I do not want Black Americans to suffer in Africa. I do not want Black Africans to suffer in Africa. But these things must be addressed to make a better Africa and a better Black world. The same things that I'm addressing here. Ugandans address these when they go to Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Nigerian Americans, Nigerians in Canada, Kenyans, people that listen to what I'm talking about understand that these things happen in Africa. And what Tariq Nasheed addresses, although yes, he does use language in which I wouldn't use towards Africa, but at the same time, these are things that the Pan-African community wants to sweep underneath the rug. And that's the problem. In Africa, a lot of stuff gets swept underneath the rug. It's a cultural thing. Black Americans, we want this conflict with Pan-Africanism. Those of us who really FBA by lineage or Black Americans want a relationship with Africa, we want to force this conflict to get a better resolution. So if delineation is that conflict, then it must be delineation, because it is better to delineate than to be taken advantage of or to be used, like what happened with Dr. Arikana and the ADDI. Dr. Arikana basically had a situation in which, she had all these Black Americans getting promised for citizenship for Burkina Faso. They paid all this money and they didn't get it. They ended up getting permanent residency. But at the same time, this is problematic because you're promising to deliver something that you can't do. And everybody sweeps this behavior.
Well, once again, they're talking about Burkina Faso and a country that was being ran by an individual who assassinated one of the leading Pan-Africanists of that time. We're talking about Blaise Compaoré, who was a puppet of the French. So once again, they're criticizing Pan-Africanism based on the actions of individuals who aren't Pan-Africanists. Yeah. He doesn't know how to draw the line between governmental Pan-Africanism and community Pan-Africanism in African countries because about the state affairs in Africa from the African context. Very true, very true.
Underneath the rug. So guys, what do you think? It's your boy Oshay Duke Jackson back at it again with another episode here.
So family, we're gonna open things up. The link is in the description. I'm gonna put the link in the chat once again, and we can tap in, have a conversation about, of course, what Oshay Duke Jackson gets wrong about Pan-Africanism. Brother Nova, I'm gonna let you go first because you've been waiting patiently. Go right ahead.
Peace, Brother Lumumba. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
And peace to the other brother Dwayne as well.
Peace.
I disagree with Oshay on a lot, but I will say that I don't believe that Oshay is Pan-African. Oshay, he tends to attack Pan-Africanists and the figures in Pan-Africanism more than any other thing. Like, let's just compare Tariq and Dr. Umar Johnson, two of the most prolific figures over here in Black America. Well, on the internet. He'll often side with Tariq. He never says anything bad about Tariq. There was one moment he did say something bad about Tariq, but Tariq kind of threatened him, and since then he's never said anything bad again. But everything that he says about Umar is slanderous when you can literally draw lines between the two, parallel lines between Dr. Umar and Tariq. Though they are both drastically different because Dr. Umar is formally educated and I believe Tariq is a high school dropout. You can still draw lines. There's a lot of similarities between the two, and it's not surprising that they kind of started out together. They used to work together. So I don't believe that Oshay is a Pan-African just based on his actions. Like, he says things out of his mouth. Oh yeah, I'm in a Pan-African space. I'm in the Pan-African circles. I'm on the continent, like, basically champion or trying to bestow himself with the legitimacy of speaking on Pan-Africanism. But everything he says about it is just derogatory. It's never anything constructive, what I would say. And that's all I have to say.
Well, I think that's a great point. He said he's in Pan-African circles, but he never mentioned a Pan-Africanist organization, individuals that he's working with, in any tangible manner to improve the condition of African people. So I would take what he said with a grain of salt. Brother Dwayne, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not extremely familiar with his videos, but from the videos I've seen over the years, he does give me the impression that he's not really a Pan-Africanist. And it's not just him, it's a problem within the Pan-African movement in general. And I think ADOS and FBA really exposed this, because a lot of the people who have gravitated to those movements would tell you that they used to be Pan-Africanist, and they're not. But then when you ask them specific questions, such as which Pan-African organizations were you involved in, what type of international Pan-African work have you actually done, they haven't done anything. They've never been in Pan-African organizations. They've never done any international Pan-African work. So it becomes an issue where a lot of people think that they're Pan-Africanist because they claim that they are, but there's no actual Pan-African work behind what they're doing. And that's why I would argue, for example, Umar Johnson. I've never seen Umar Johnson as somebody who I would see as a serious Pan-Africanist, because he claims Pan-Africanism, but he's got no Pan-African organization. Far as I could tell, since he's been building the school, I think it's a one-man effort. I don't know if he's got a real team or a real group of people behind him to build the school. So the whole point of Pan-Africanism is supposed to be global unity of African people. You can't be a one-man show and be Pan-Africanist. So I'm always skeptical of people who claim to be Pan-Africanist who have no actual history or track record of doing any unification work, particularly international unification work.
Uganda, he states, I've never seen Oshay appear on Uganda's TV talk show, Pan-African Friday, on UBC television, Uganda. The Pan-African community he claims he's a part of is really in his own mind. That may be the case. I mean, I remember, I can recall vividly when I interviewed Afro Elite on my platform, and even if you may be aware that was back in the fall of October. I think it was October 2022, back when Ohio State had C.J. Stroud, and he was the favorite, of course, the front runner to win Heisman, and we know how that went. But what ended up taking place was he stated that he was a former Pan-Africanist. And I asked him, what organization were you part of? None. What Pan-Africanist work have you ever done? None. I said, well, it sounds like you believe that you were Pan-Africanist because you wore a dashiki one day, a couple of days a week. And so I said, that would make you a cultural nationalist, excuse me, but not a Pan-Africanist. So we tend to find this, unfortunately, this concept and practice of individuals claiming to be Pan-Africanists when actually they've never engaged in any Pan-Africanist work. And then when you even ask them questions about the ideology, they tend to know nothing about it. And we've probably done 3 or 4 shows here on my platform at LumumbaSpeaks.com, of course, in conjunction with Beacon Network, on the core tenets of Pan-Africanism, because we've had individuals on this platform, right, make the claim that they were Pan-Africanists, and we're talking about Dynasty Amir, and knew nothing about Pan-Africanism. This is a real problem, a serious problem. And we know this is kind of par for the course. We find the same thing with religion, right? We have individuals who claim that they're Christians, know nothing about Christianity. It's kind of par for the course. This is something that people do, but irrespective, it is extremely problematic. And this leads to a lot of misinformation regarding the ideology, the movement, the mission, the goals, the purpose. Like I said, I've been a Pan-Africanist for over 20 years. I have a large assortment of literature on scholarly literature on Pan-Africanism, and I've never read anything from any individual that claimed that they were trying to flatten blackness. In fact, as you all know here at Lumumba Speaks, we have the Pan-African Leadership Series, where we're chronicling the lives of over 200 great Pan-Africanists, right? To learn from them how to make a better world for African people today, right? And none of these individuals have advocated for a flattening of Black identity, right? But he argues that in order to be a Pan-Africanist, to engage in solidarity, one would have to do so. I would disagree. I am an African American, but Dwayne Omowale is an Afro-Guyanese scholar, right? We have had connections since what, 2022, yes?
Yeah, I think yeah, 2022.
And there's never been a time where Brother Dwayne has told me that you need to flatten your African American identity. We need to think in a rather total unitary manner, right? These are just claims that are just fundamentally false, right? So, real quick, Africa, Mayo, I appreciate you, brother or sister, right? You don't want to be gender biased here, right? I appreciate you watching today. If you could hit the subscribe and like button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Greatly appreciate it. It's frustrating how those who are loud and wrong have the widest distribution in the YouTube algorithm. This is very true. It's unfortunate, but we know that this is what we're up against, right? And I'm not a fan of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Some would call him the dishonorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, right? But what we find here is an organized lie is more effective than a disorganized truth.
I think the other problem as well that we have, particularly with algorithms, is, and I pointed out, typically people who are very serious about Pan-Africanism are involved in organizations actually doing work. So a lot of those people don't necessarily have the time to figure out the algorithms to be on social media like that to build up those platforms.
Absolutely, that's very true.
Yes, unfortunately, it's the case. And I mean, this even goes back to Umar. Umar spends a lot of time building up his social media presence because it's all he has. So it's unfortunately the case that in social media platforms, people who aren't really doing the work have the freedom to build up the largest platforms. And typically the people who are actually in the communities, really doing work building in the communities, aren't on social media to build up the platform. So the algorithms cannot push us as much. The other problem with the algorithms is algorithms are specifically designed to promote division, discord, drama. So the whole ADOS FBA movement has been built off of that, built off of controversy, off of the conflicts, and the algorithms push that. So it is a real problem, and this is why I always make the argument that you can't rely on social media for all of your information. At some point, you have to be able to disconnect, you have to be able to find information on your.
And I would say more than often, I would say you shouldn't rely on social media, right? I would argue, and this is someone who, of course, has a platform, right? I've had this platform probably for about 5 or 6 years now. Do the research, and if you are going to listen to someone, ask them to provide, as we say in these YouTube streets, receipts, right? Or as I would say in the academy, references, right? Right. Let me see that works cited page. Let me see that bibliography, right? Because this happens a lot, and as one of the brothers said, a lot of times they just like to hear themselves talk. But I think what's most important is we want to be solution-based, right? We want to be able to come together in of course, virtual setting to be able to address issues that are pertinent to our community, irrespective of where we are in the world, and in an incisive manner provides plausible solutions to those issues, right? We're doing that, of course, with the water filters to Togo, right? And I need to do a better job of promoting that here on the platform. We're doing that. We're doing something here at Sac State where we're providing socks for the homeless, right? Most people may be unaware that one of the most important items that homeless people need, the people who are housing challenged, I think that's a better word, a more politically correct term, is having dry and warm feet, right? One of the reasons that this is probably my first live in about two months is because of I've been doing the work, right? And when you're doing the work, you don't have time to bloviate for hours on end on social media. I actually had a conversation last night with Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, who we know, of course, is the author of Solutions to Anti-Black Misandry. We had him on the show about 2 years ago. But one of the things he shared with me is he says, I don't want to just be doing lives all the time where I'm talking about celebrity gossip. I want my lives to be meaningful. I want them to be impactful, and I want them to be knowledge-based, where I'm actually empowering brothers to take this information and find a way to improve their lives. And I said that, of course, I say Black Power. So just one of those things to consider when we talk about doing the work that we do. Mr. Sandman, I appreciate you tapping in, brother. How are those Penn State Nittany Lions doing? How are those Penn State Nittany Lions doing, brother? How are those Penn State Nittany Lions doing? Huh? That was number 2 in the country. I'm sorry, family. I got to do this because Mr. Sandman here. Tap in, brother. Cam up, and you're going to get it. Come on to the live. Y'all was number 2 in the country. Y'all said y'all was going to win the Natty this year. And y'all got your coach fired. And you're 3-4 and 0-4 in the Big Ten. And y'all playing us next week. And you know what's going to happen. We're going to do you bad. We're going to whoop on you like you got in trouble at school. We're going to whoop on you like you stole something out your mama's purse. We're going to whoop on you like you was misbehaving and you was talking bad to a grown-up. We're going to give y'all that work for the 9th year in a row. But tap in, brother. Don't duck this smoke now. Come on, Penn State Nittany Lions. Come on. Let's go. Go ahead and tap in. I'm sorry, family. You know, Mr. Sandman is from the Illadelph. Some people call it Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but we're not doing that here. But of course, he is, of course, an avid, I would say a rabid Penn State Nittany Lions football fan. And of course, as you all know, they started the season that's the number 2 team in preseason, and now they're unranked and have a losing record. So we know some teams can't handle the pressure like the Ohio State University can. So that's all I'm going to say about that issue. And of course, we're going to, of course, focus on the issue at hand. So if no one has any, hopefully we can have somebody provide final thoughts, and then I guess we can, of course, end this live. But definitely want to hear from, of course, Mr. Sandman, defender of logic, Sister Mary Shy. I appreciate you, sister. How's Columbus treating you? Quick question. I know there was a post back maybe a couple months ago. You said that you were done with Pan-Africanism. I think you said you were done basically with, you know, this kind of political conscious type movement, right? The Black conscious community. If you don't mind, and you don't have to cam up, so you know you do not have to cam up, would you mind maybe sharing with us why you made that statement? And what was it, because of the antagonisms, the infighting that kind of made you say, you know what, I don't want to be part of this anymore? If you could, sister, tap in and be part of the conversation, that would be greatly appreciated. So I'm gonna put the link in the chat once again, and I definitely hope that you can tap in. Once again, as you all know, family, you do not have to cam up, and you do not have to use your actual name. You can use a pseudonym to be part of the conversation. But I would love to hear from you, sister, because I think one of the things that we sometimes don't do is listen to people in terms of why they're disenchanted with the movement. Of course, we have a lot of individuals like Tariq Nasheed, Oshay Duke Jackson, the FBI ADOS Brigade, that of course push back against Pan-Africanism in a manner that's dishonest and disingenuous. But I would love to hear from individuals who may have take umbrage or had some negative experiences to find out how can we, of course, improve things on our end. So hopefully, sister, you're able to tap in and be part of the conversation. Pan-African First, FBA, ADOS movement often takes issue with the evolution of Afrocentric thought within Pan-African ideology. They believe the focus has shifted too much toward African culture rather than political foundation of the movement. Their understanding is very limited. Well, yeah, it's limited, misguided. I mean, oftentimes they just make claims that are just opposed to facts, right? And they do this because they know most individuals are unaware of what Pan-Africanism actually is. For example, my master's thesis, which is on my website, LumumbaSpeaks.com, not so innocent plug, go check it out. It's titled, Is Pan-Africanism Dead? And one of the things that we found was there were a number of individuals, when I was interviewing individuals for my thesis, who they thought Pan-Africanism was a religion. They actually asked me that question, is that a religion? I said, no, it's a political ideology, the oldest political ideology created by Black people, started, of course, here in the depth decadence and dysphoria of the Western Hemisphere, yada, yada, yada. So extremely disconcerting, but as a result, they're able to take advantage of people's ignorance and then, of course, manipulate them in a manner that I would argue leads some to engage politically in a manner that is not in their best interest. Excuse me. After you are able to watch those links I sent you, you could do a part 2 of this to further expose how Oshay gets things wrong. Okay, brother, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Any final thoughts, family, before we close out? Sister Shy, if you could put a 1 in the chat, just want to know if are you still here on the live, because I would like to hear from you if that is possible. Mr. Sandman is here. OHIO, Mr. Sandman, how those Nittany Lions doing? Don't duck the smoke. Don't duck the smoke.
I ain't ducking.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Y'all got that one.
Yeah, I mean, what happened against UCLA? What happened against Northwestern? What happened against Oregon? What's going on, brother?
I mean, you was right about that coach, man. He trash, man. He trash, man. We was about to lose all of our top recruits. because of this guy. Man, we had like a whole bunch of all of our top players talking about they're about to enter the transfer portal, so they can save a year eligibility and everything. I'm like, man, I'm glad we got rid of him. Man, why can't we get a good coach? If we get a good coach, we'd be right up there. We'd be right. I mean,
No, y'all won't.
we was ranked number 2
No,
in the
y'all won't.
nation for a reason.
And yeah, and guess what? Texas is ranked number 1 too. Let's keep it a buck, man. Listen, often imitated, never duplicated. It's the Ohio State University. Come on, but I mean, we gotta keep it real here. You know what I'm saying? You gotta understand, we're gonna change our name from the Ohio State Buckeyes to the Ohio State Himothy's because we're him, not them. Okay.
Hey, the best running back to ever play for Ohio State come from my hometown, Philadelphia.
I wouldn't say he's the best running back ever, but he is an all-time great, and he had enough sense to get the hell out of the Keystone State and come to the Buckeye State and become great. He had enough sense not to go to was it Beaver Stadium?
Yeah, that's where they play. Yeah.
Right, he had enough sense not to do that. So let me see here. The biggest frustration for me with Pan-Africanism is slow operations. The pace it operates at is too slow for me, difficult to find and contact people, slow applies, poor marketing, and visibility. Overstood. How do you think we can fix that? Dr. Lumumba, I'm still waiting for the list of books that we can consider as necessary for Pan-Africanists to read, like Bible to Christian. Overstood. Please send me another email, brother. Like I said, I've been running ragged. I please charge it to my head and not my heart. Please send me another email, and I will try to collate a list for you. I do apologize. And to be quite honest with you, I think Brother Dwayne would do a better job of that than I would. But I'm gonna give it a good old college try. So just gonna be quite honest with you. Kevin, aka Mr. K, says I've got the list, and he does. He's put me on to a lot of literature as well. So I would definitely lean on the expertise of Kevin, aka Mr. K, or of course Brother Dwayne. But as I said before, I would give it a good old college try. As we all know, although I am a Pan-Africanist and I've read a large amount of literature on Pan-Africanism, my scholarly inquiry focuses on, of course, Black students, Black student development, and of course, Black Culture Center. So just want to give you all that. Let's see here. Hello, Lumumba. Sorry, but not tonight. It's not a good time tonight, but I will explain soon. I give thanks, sister. Just glad that you was able to hop on the live and, of course, still be part of the community in whatever way you feel is best for you. Little to no online presence. Content is hard to find. It's frustrating trying to find people to collaborate to, and they make it difficult to find a community. I hope that changes. Overstood. So marketing is an issue. Might need to take a page out of the Nation of Islam, right? I mean, we have to take issue with them for their teachings and their doctrine and, of course, behavior. But they do have an online presence, right? And so that is something to consider. Mr. Sandman, were you able to, of course, watch the video where we were critiquing and highlighting what Oshay Duke Jackson gets wrong about Pan-Africanism?
I missed that part of the podcast. Is it too late to see the video one more time?
Yeah, it would be too late because it would be redundant for everyone else. But you know, your boy, Dr. Umar Johnson, I see you got the on your screen, you got on your picture, you got the West Philly beard, right? What did he say? He said, "Well, you're not 6'3" ninja. You're not Pan-Africanist #1 ninja. You ain't getting flown all over the country, all over the planet to hear people speak. Ninja, date with the doctor, right? We got a new thing coming out called Date with the Doctor. $500 to get you a date. I'll pay for the date. You don't pay for the date. Don't hate. I know you saw the video where he posted that.
Yeah, I seen that video, and yeah, you know what I'm saying. Hey, I mean, he's a doctor. You know what I mean? You got to give him respect for earning his credentials.
Don't make me take my shirt off and beat my chest.
Hey, he got his credentials. You know what I'm saying? Y'all, it can be verified. I think if you call his institution that he went to for his doctorate degree. But hey, I mean, if that's what he needs to do to get the money, get to that bag, then you know what I mean. I can't hate on it. You know what I mean?
I got a problem with him scamming.
How's that scamming? Hey, that's just a dating game.
He's
Right.
scamming. And that's one of the things pop culture promotes is the con game. That you're always trying to manipulate someone in some way, shape, or form.
Hey, the only reason why he would become a part of that sounds like, he has like some type of promotion team that's pushing, these
He ain't got no promotion
antics.
team. That's him. Because if he had a team, he would already have a school.
No, I'm talking about in regards to like building up his popularity,
Well, he's
amongst
losing
the
popularity
media.
because these type of antics cause people not to take him serious.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like an investor or a person who's invested in or who's serious about invested in the school, then yeah, you would look at that and be like, this guy ain't,
If you're
ain't
a serious
serious.
person, period, you're not going to take him serious after saying something like that.
I mean, our little donations don't make a huge dent on the end game for that school,
My
but the
friend
people
account it's been said that he's raised over $2 million in the past 15 years.
yeah, $2 million, but how much does it actually cost to build
$2
that
million
school?
is $2 million.
What's that?
$2 million is $2 million.
Yeah, $2 million, but you still have bills to pay, right? I mean,
well, what bills does he have to pay?
I don't know. I can't. I'm not his attorney. I mean, I'm not his accountant, so I can't tell you all the bills that goes into like building a school. But
Well, he's not
no,
building.
it ain't cheap.
It's an empty building.
Yeah, it's an empty building. Then you got the plumbing, and then you got the AC, then you got the electrical, and then the maintenance of the building, and all of that stuff adds up. And then the project concerns, getting the right people in there. So I don't know, what I mean, how much it costs them to do all that stuff.
It's going to be another 25 years. There still ain't going to be no school, man. This dude is 50 years old.
You said the building's 50 years old?
No, I said he's 50 years old. He's scamming, man. He's scamming.
Hey.
Listen, real quick, like Sister Shy said when I posted the video, she said, get a job, get a job, get a job. I said it 3 times, get a job. He's scamming, man. He just don't want to work.
I mean, if he has a doctorate degree, I'm pretty sure he could get a job paying him decent
But
money.
he doesn't want to work. That's the issue.
Yeah, I guess that it is what it is.
Man. But okay, family. Hey, I appreciate everyone for tapping in. Until next time, I see you, Sister Shy. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Always, always, always bet on black. Peace. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on black. Peace.